Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Spirit of Creating. And in today's episode, I wanted to talk about two voices that we can have within us. So we always have like an internal dialogue running our everyday lives, like a running commentary, and we don't always question it, and we don't even question where it comes from, what it's saying, and it can be a driver to our actions. And I think there's two voices, and one is the inner critic, and one is an inner guide. And when I talk about the inner guide, I'm really talking about intuition. And there's distinct trademarks of both. So with the inner critic, I feel like it's the motivator and the driver for our everyday actions. And really, it's the voice of 1,000 people. It's a voice that was cultivated in our informative years. It's a comment, a throwaway comment that a teacher might have made about us, something a caregiver said. And then as our childlike selves, we've interpreted that and then had a belief around it and then built a whole system of beliefs around it. And so our inner critic can be a voice that isn't really ours. It's a multitude of voices that have like become amalgamated and now kind of run the show and direct us and tell us about ourselves, tell us about our output, tell us about the world around us. And the signs of an inner critical voice would be it's judgmental, critical, it's looking for ways you could be better, it's telling you what isn't good enough about you and your work, it's telling you what you could fix about yourself and what you create. It has moving goalposts. So let's just say you've decided to create a poem and you say to yourself, once you've created this poem, you will share it on social media. And then you might reward yourself with, I don't know, a cup of wonderful coffee or something. You'll create the poem. And as soon as you've created it, the goalposts will change. It won't be good enough to share. You definitely don't deserve the cup of coffee. You need to work really quite hard on this new piece of poetry. It's not anything related to acceptable to the outside world. And the goalposts have shifted. Even if it's just minimal shifting, it's shifting. And you kind of never hit the target. It's a moving target, but you're never quite hitting it. And overall, you just don't feel that good. If you're being guided by this inner voice that's critical and judgmental, and compares and competes, you'll know because you won't feel good. And the trademarks are whatever you're creating isn't good enough. And underneath that is the thought that you're not really good enough. And the to-do list for you to fix yourself and what you make in the world is never ending. It's a lengthening list. It never really gets anything crossed off it. And so there's quite big signals around this voice if you're listening to it. And there's big signs around it. But I think we can get really used to listening to it. So we become like fish in water. We don't really recognize that that's what we're being guided by. And then there's the inner guide. And it's like our own compass, bespoke to us. And it's not the voice of a million other people. It's singular. It might not even come in the notion of a voice or sentences. It could just be a sense of something that you know innately. It could be imagery that comes up, and it's got a completely different feel to it. It's peaceful, it's non-judgmental, it doesn't compare, it doesn't compete, but it does guide you in a way that's very bespoke to you. So this voice wouldn't work for anybody else. See, the inner critic would work for everybody. It's the same thing across the board. It's just highly critical, highly judgmental with a heavy negative bias. Whereas the inner guide is very much bespoke to you, your inner calling, your purpose, the values that you align to. So it's kind of like a personal sat nav, but we're not used to listening to this personal sat nav. We don't even know it's there half the time. And it takes a bit of skill and practice to tune into it, which would mean turning the volume down on the inner critic and listening out or sensing something else there. And this voice isn't just all rainbows and daisies. It's not like it's just going to say, oh, you know, have a day off and don't do this and just relax and go to bed, or it might say that. But the truth of the matter is you'll still be doing hard things. It will still guide you to do things that are for your highest benefit and for your highest good. But it won't come in a judgmental, negative vein. It's more balanced. There's clarity. It's simple. It's peaceful. And it won't give you an overall picture of what you should do. It will just guide you to the next step, quite simply. And it doesn't come with a sense of urgency. And this is another sign of the inner critic, highly urgent. It's almost like everything requires a 999 level of emergency, and we must get onto it and we must do it now. And with the inner guide, there's no sense of urgency like that. There's a nudging towards doing something, and it might repeatedly nudge you. And that's why sometimes when we have dreams that we haven't really ever accounted for, or actions to take that we haven't taken, they kind of keep repeating on us, and we keep kind of coming across them as a whisper or a nudge, like, why don't you do that? And that voice doesn't really go away, but we don't want it to, because it's there for a reason. But it's not coming with a sense of emergency. It's almost like, this would be good for you if you did it. And I'll keep reminding you until maybe you make a move in that direction. So I think as a creative, but just generally in life itself, we don't want the inner critic to be our main driver. We want the inner critic to be a voice that can play out and then hopefully just dissolve into the background, that we really don't pay any attention to, preferably. Or we allow its existence, but we're not driven by it. We're not listening to it. We're just letting it play out. And the inner guide is the compass we're using to direct ourselves. And we can tell the difference between peace and the urgent, the negative bias and the peaceful equilibrium that the other voice might bring. And that in our souls will feel better. We don't feel like positive and upbeat constantly, but there isn't a drain on our energy. We have the energy to do what we need to do that day. We have the resources that we have, and we can utilize them. And there's a knowing that we're going in the right direction. And there's a self-assurance and a self-reliance when this voice comes into play that we don't find with the voice of the inner critic. So if you're not sure what's guiding you, or if you're wondering what voice might be guiding you, you just look at these trademarks. Do you feel good? Is everything urgent? Is nothing good enough? Is your to-do list a never-ending one where nothing you want to really achieve gets achieved because the goalposts keep moving? Then you're being guided by an inner critic, and you want to really turn the volume down on that. You'd be better off being guided by nothing than being guided by that voice. And when you turn the volume down, you'll sense another directive. You'll sense that there's something guiding you to do the next thing in a really calm and peaceful manner. And it might be the hard thing. It might be, write that chapter. Go and buy that sketchbook. Go and dedicate some time to this now. Form a commitment. It might be something that you think is quite difficult to do, but it will give you a tiny drop of information of how you could go about doing it that fits where you are right now, that fits who you are right now. You don't need to change. You don't need to become a whole other person. It makes room and space for you as you are. It likes you and loves you as you are, and it guides you from that space. If you have any questions about this topic, you can contact me at illustratingrain@gmail.com, and I'll be back again next week.